Chile here with Saturn Neptune in Aries news. This is the weirdest I heard. Now, Saturn Neptune conjunction is associated with Russia. Neptune is a scam, and I was predicting real estate scam, but I wasn't thinking about military recruitment scams. So, according to Kenya, Russia sent 10,000 of their citizens to fight in Ukraine uh, by lying to them and saying that they offer a job offer. Um, NATO needs to hear this. Yeah. Um, so those are military recruitment scams. It's wartime, so there's war-related scams. Because Neptune is where something can be scammy. For example, Neptune in Pisces could have been like, healing professions. And I actually was caught in a scam where there's a community that was basically sacrificing people when Neptune was in Pisces, and Neptune was basically approaching my ascendant at the time. Um, and Neptune in Aries is apparently military recruitment scams. Like I could think about, weapon deals that are scammy, or a weapon being stolen and sold illegally and stuff like that. But those things apparently also exist. And and the combination as an astrologer is interesting because Saturn Neptune conjunction is like Russia and China, and Aries is such an incompatible. So what could happen with that? Well, with that. um, so this is, and they would get a tourist visa if they, when they were recruited. Um, yeah, they were thinking they were going to be working immigrants, and it was an ad by Russia, so it wasn't even like illegal working immigrants or anything like that. Um, really terrible. And Kenya is now trying to fight it through the Russian embassy. Um, yeah, that's basically the current news. We have NATO news. Okay. More defense investment and production. E5. Okay. US pulls fighter jets from NATO exercise in Norway over Iran tensions. Russia tested NATO airspace 18 times in 2025 alone. Um, Now, here's the thing with that, because this really does create a situation where NATO is considered a rational player when it finally responds. And if anybody is having Israel has the right to defend itself flashbacks, I would not necessarily say that this would be a scenario that will play out, but it does provide the ground for such possible scenario. Um, NATO needs to define the substance of its 1.5% pledge. US presses NATO for major reset ending mission in Iraq. Turkish Navy demonstrates the new capability. Oh, I got something to say. Okay. Senior Allied officials meet in Istanbul to boost NATO's efforts to address security. Shift in mindset. So this is a week ago in allies, deterrence and defense. Now, in times of war, and I actually see that playing out because I predicted that the underlying threads of communication that work by something that is not sovereign will have implications. And in war mindset, sovereign peer communication and the if you think about nervous system, when I was in academia, even a broken clock is correct twice a day. And there was an experiment where we were walking in the room, we were supposed to not bump into each other. And so with each attempt, we got better at that until we got reached the flow state. This is sovereign to sovereign peer communication where the nervous system naturally aligns. And the trauma bond based, um, not sovereign to sovereign peer communication is difficult in military time, in wartime. um, the implications to the non-sovereign um, training methods is that in wartime we are missing the sovereign to sovereign that makes or breaks communication. Because just at wartime, where we need it the most, we begin to remember, wait a second, there was a ritual, that person raped that person was violating that person, and we don't work as one with this union that would be cohesive, true, and sovereign, which is imperative to wartime. I predicted that this would be an issue, and um, again, it's not the fault of NATO per se. It's something that's bigger than NATO, but I definitely see how it impacts um, the 5% commitment was made in June, and the evidence of progress in delivering on that commitment is visible. But today we also saw evidence of something else, real shift in mindset, unity of vision, a much stronger European defense within NATO, a sense of urgency and ownership. Exactly, that's what needs to be, and in praxis, I think aiming to sovereign with all that sovereignty entails on energy level um, is something I think we can't afford losing, or we can't afford not establishing, even if during wartime. And sovereign to sovereign is all that entails. This is a war where there would be way more involvement. It's a war that happens during Pluto in Aquarius with Saturn in Aries. Um, and and actually, with all that Aries there, people are not cynical. They expect the change, and they expect sovereignty, and expect sovereignty as a result, and sovereignty as the way. And but knowing that today, and tending to that today, um, can definitely shift the timeline It has the power to shoot. That's the thing with Aries. We have no excuses in the sense that we're not a defeatist because it's kind of like, hey, that thing does have implications. Amazing. We have 3 years of Saturn and 15 years of Neptune to change that. And we have an opportune time where Chiron is on the Lilith and Rahu of NATO. Um, Again, I can think about it from NATO's perspective. Of course, relevant to other perspectives as well. Um, yeah, that's what I have to say. Um, World news. Now, by the way, on the bigger scope, this is regardless of military. The sense of oneness was created by trauma bonds and torture and so on in ritual abuse, and it was not actually a team. It was a team of treason. Okay, this is something that's regardless of military, regardless of what I just said, is a bigger issue. And it's not a basis for unity when we think about appeasing the conditions of Aries to sustain through 15 years of outer planet in the sign of not just war, but innovation, entrepreneurship, expeditions, and identifying opportunities that stand the test of time. So when they're sovereign to sovereign, there can be self trust and mutual trust. And there can be appraisal of, instead of running into treason discussions, which are in many times a byproduct of trauma bond and lack of sense of self, then we can discuss, does did we include everyone in our resources distribution in a sovereign, honoring of sovereignty way? And yes, of course, it's a challenge, but that's the challenge of the spirit of the coming decades. Very different from how society at large has been running. Um, Middle East to North Africa. I think also that the last degrees of Uranus in Taurus, they really show us relationships going through the upheaval and begging the question, is it going to cross the threshold and retrieve sense of self and have sovereign to sovereign relations, or dead bodies upon dead bodies, because it's next to Beta per se, a very sensitive point in the world at large. I think again, moving away from the topic of NATO, I think the Epstein files, with what they entail, um, expose the necessity, the need to have something that's actually sovereign. It is the soft underbelly of the secret societies exposed. And it's the grand missing that when we acknowledge that it's the grand missing, then we can address that. And because if the great money is done by trafficking, okay, pedo ring, which is extortion called, the entire humanity is affected. At least 10 killed in Israeli strikes in Lebanon, Bekaa Valley Health Ministry says this yesterday. And let's face it, that peer-to-peer connection is needed. And people believe that it can be bought, but this is where we actually need it. Then a lot of people see that, for people who have, let's say, Taurus 8 house, then they can really see that, have their, you know, after, whether it's business or more, um, whether they're after partnership or after commitment relations being based on trauma bond and treason cults, which entail and involve human trafficking, or whether they actually have sovereign to sovereign relations. Uranus' role there is to create sovereign to sovereign. And then we have that connection when we need it. And life energy is life energy. We can't play with it. I mean, they can play with it, but what ends up is that that it has implications. And people can't talk about third parties or cheating or even treason when the honoring of that life energy wasn't there as foundations. Now again, it's not about blame. It's about awareness tending to. Pakistan versus New Zealand delayed due to rain. Okay, that's the most we have. Um, it's enough. I mean, the tariffs are a big issue. Um, this military recruitment scam is a big issue. Talking about Kenya. Um, Now, another thing that with Neptune Aries, um, we can't be too proud when it comes to abuse of power in Aries domain. Now, we also have to be aware that what I'm saying is not the way that people were growing up to. And I'm being incredibly tender. Chiron is opposed in Spica. And and this is how should I say that? It's a reality check um, to unprecedented levels. Okay, something like the Epstein list never has been. Maybe in a previous civilization. Um, which means that to such levels of the common people publicly discussing. Okay. Okay, this is unprecedented, but it also allows us the gift of grace to understand what were the settings. Um, and this is, by the way, a problem of the common people as well as the elite. And um, it's also kind of a reality check for when we thought, oh, we are no longer living in those barbaric times, the uncivilized behavior of the elite. And we were traumatically informed that that's Absolutely not the case. Nee. Mhm. Nee. Now, they all. Oh wait, thank you. Nee. I'm recording. הם מבינים עברית. Yes. To think that the people watching my broadcast do not understand also Hebrew. Ah, amazing. Okay. Now all we need is Saskia and everything everything is fine. um so more Saturn Neptune news. No, but that military scam was something. Now here is what it means that they uh, not declassifying what I heard. Um okay. Anyway, tomorrow Mars leaves the 22nd degree. The 22nd degree. That's not the correct response for what I just said for an entire episode. And I meant that. Um, and the moon will be squaring Pluto from Taurus. So this is going to be another one of those um, deeply emotional. Now here's the thing: because Pluto is ruled by Saturn that conjoins Neptune, this moon square Pluto is going to be profound. It's just a couple of hours, but those are profound couple of hours. Um, yeah. Okay. Um, Sun ingress to third degree Pisces. Good news. Sun will be with Fomalhaut. So this is the annual time where in a couple of days we're gonna have the ability to see clearer into places that are nonverbal and psychic communication. And with Jupiter retrograde in Cancer, particularly if we think about the time where Jupiter and Venus conjoined. I'm not gonna put the talisman ahead of their conjunction now because I kind of feel like it's gonna be too intense for me. Already that sense of self talisman is deeply profound. Um, and that entire transit is overwhelming. So really looking forward to Mars leaving the 22nd degree tomorrow. and this is where with the sun formula we're gonna have this psychic awareness regarding relational patterns, and the moon will be towards Beta Persei Gemini. So between Sedna to Beta Persei, this is going to be profound sun transit to formal out. And that's going to conjoin Rahu. So some deeply profound understandings regarding the unspoken relational perceptions to do with um, leaders here can be mm, leaders here is Piscean, so I think about the exposure of, let's say, Deepak Chopra and Epstein, and how that would have affect his teaching, um, relational teachings, the sorting the wheat from the muck regarding those um, and the medical related fields, particularly, by the way, the holistic medicine. Um, and maybe some drug lords. It's still Pisces, um, artists, and so on. I know this was the big fashion design fiasco with the Epstein files. Um, so that might expose or reveal more. I'm not saying names here because again, it's Pisces. Mars is seemingly uninvolved, but definitely um, perhaps more profound in unspoken understandings about how people relate in those industries. Um, I will take one look at NATO's chart because the moon is so accentuating of NATO. Yeah, yes, the moon is on the Rahu of NATO. So it's a moon Rahu to NATO, and Chiron is crossed it and it's on its way to Rahu. This is this is a transit that has a lot of potential to curate the where is the alliance going. And it's a Mars ruled. Mars is stronger. It's in its home sign. It is in the eighth house, which has to do with, resources. Um, but this is also where Aries is the individual. Moon in the 10th house um, denoting at the individuals desiring to have a say in the alliance. Again, this was the foundation was around civil war o'clock. So, and indeed, we see that coming to play, which I already dedicated an episode to the union of um, civil rights and military alliances. Um, I'm pondering about something. There is here, and to be honest, here is what I don't know. There is a calling of the desire to people to actually people. Will it happen? I don't know. Though you know, I think it's obvious what I mean by that. And will like, is it going to the direction of people actually peopling? I don't know. Okay, like I honestly don't know. Um, but I do take into account that there is a very accentuated timeline of civil war, civil rights, labor unions, um, and I think the adaptation to what Uranus in Taurus is bringing, and perhaps what Jupiter in Cancer is bringing, which is relational healing, growing from trauma bond to, because we cannot talk about democracy without talking about individual human rights, without talking about sense of self, without talking about zero rape, zero slavery goes without saying, but even further, without talking about, and I know, um, but without talking about secure attachment and relaxed arousal rather than misplaced arousal. Um, and those are undertones that are unspoken but can make or break a lot of campaigns of recruitment. Um, whether something will have the legitimacy over the monopoly over power or not. Okay, if we think about it, nearly all the big media tech companies are on the Epstein list. All the while, there are attempts to enforce certain agendas that are, at the very least, that do need to sort the wheat from the muck from what was within the scope of that Epstein domain. Um, so, and those undertones are we can't forget that we had a decade since the Me Too, and that decade was not just people raging and looking for a change, but people learning communication skills, understanding how things affect their businesses, understanding the connection between their dwellings. Okay, residence is a do. I use the word residence instead of housing when I said I don't have a residence because I wasn't informant. I meant housing. Um, um, and there was just so much growing, and so this these timelines of Uranus, Gemini, outer planet through Aries, Pluto in Aquarius, um, are another chapter on that to an even greater extent. So it brings challenges that are fundamental. They are, but it also brings opportunities. And I'd like to emphasize on that because um, how should I say that? No big money is made without humanity. And there is a deadline to every big money that's made on the account of humanity. Um, and that will manifest itself as um, weapon deals that, okay, like I said, it has implication. Um, and if the response is by more of the same, that can compile to. So, but if we understand the little signs and the little omens right now, then we can adapt and adjust. Because at the end of the day, it was Rockefeller at the aftermath of the Second World War that had to contend with women having right to vote and own bank account, knowing they would not be taxed, that the overall income tax of the household will not double itself. Whether it's because women didn't make as much as men, or women began to require for the men to participate in the household and limit the working hours of everyone. Um, and yet it was the same Rockefeller that perhaps did not exercise his preventative power when the suffragists were in the concentration camps, that ended up okay, stating the obvious state of Palestine stamp and so on. And so, so, but here is the thing, that if we do see the omens and adapt, then that can completely shift the timeline. I know that to convince people that were used to one thing, but hey, they weren't used to Epstein lists running around rampant in social media, including the names of the social media, completely exposing to the gutter every single attempt to limit the freedom of speech under any, without that being met with the fierce awareness that it's not protecting any children. Um, so again, the way it runs with Aries, either things align with sovereignty or they hit a breaking point where they eventually have to align with sovereignty. Now, because it's Neptune, uh, the bubble can be evoked. Okay, so so this is where I'm saying, like, I'm not going to paint it in rose-colored glasses, um, but I'm not going to paint it in doom and gloom either. At the end of the day, an offer needs to authentically yield the result of sovereign sense of self, live and let live type of lifestyle. And Saturn is there for only 3 years, so austerity. Oh, and here's the thing: austerity policies can be when people actually see sovereignty as a result. For example, if I have, tomorrow a safe house and land with food sovereignty, being able to eat from the crops or grow some chicken, um, not being subjected to debt or to taxes that would, okay, overwhelm and so on and so forth. Um, and somebody would talk to me about, austerity policy where I would have to rely more on the local market in the coming 3 years. So I would dig some half moons, and and I would have more faith in that austerity policy because I see how it's already yielding the basis. Okay, so but if that basis is not there, or if something is, something like Epstein, um, then the belief in austerity policies is not there. So this is what I have to say with Saturn Aries. Now, in war economy, we have to take into account that a lot of money changes hands. And I think the world is looking at the fact that Israel had 2 years of war with a stable currency. And probably they are both asking what's behind that and having a case where a currency is stable through war, through 2 years of war. And not only that, the dollar even weakened in comparison to the shekel. Um, like I said, I do not say that this is a story of success in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that it is an example of war economy that doesn't destabilize the currency. And if the only way that people would agree to something different would be if every single traffic in a state would be evacuated in favor of housing first for both the survivors and any other homeless people. Okay? That's the level that it would take for people to give up living with a stable currency during wartime, prolonged 2 years wartime. Now you're going to say, but Chile, the whole point of the World War is to shift the currency. I'm saying, okay, but here are the challenges. Um, what people expect to see with Aries is more sovereignty, individual human rights. No way around it. When they do see that, many things that were unprecedented are possible. But they have to see that in praxis. Let's say, I don't know, if somebody comes today to Israel, Palestine, suddenly when they arrive, zero rape, zero slavery, zero targeting, zero spiritual warfare. And flexible transition in and out of employment or self-employment conditions. Do I care what their if whatever the language is, I'm already in love. I want to study that language. But if it's the other way around, before I would blame them, I would simply say, well, they're no better than the problems that we have. And then would continue to point at the problems that we have, so we would tend to what needs to resolve from here, that was making weird agreements with there. Which is something that upon war it needs to be taken into consideration. Okay, if Russia tomorrow arrives, I don't know, to Portugal, somebody would be asking questions about the troll list. And vice versa. Um, and people expect to basically have their sovereignty honored with all that that entails. Now again, not the usual modus operandi for for wartime, but it's Aries, Aquarius, Taurus to Gemini outer planets that we're talking about. So um, and even if the and how should I say that? Not appeasing the sovereignty factor has dire consequences. And as we can see, we opened with the names of the who's and who's and who's and who's in fashion, Harvard, high tech, politics, economy, sociology, social science, exact science. I don't know how they call exact. Okay, what they call the fundamental science. Um, spiritual science, doctors,